as I mentioned before, it's always a good idea to do all your wet processes first. And so we've done the sanding, we've done the etching into the surface, and one of the other wet processes that I'd like to show you, which is quite a fun process, bring these out here, is on these older photographs that have printed on the photo processing machines. This is the Fuji Color Crystal Archive. Let's see what else I have here. That's also Fuji Color, Fuji Crystal. I know Kodak also has the paper too. Let's see. These are the newer ones. Oh, here we go. Oh, Fuji. All right, so these are all Fuji, but they're, as I mentioned before, it's a good idea to get all of your wet processes done first. So another fun technique that I'd like to share with you is the process of working with the photos that are printed on the traditional paper and working with bleach. Now, you definitely want to make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area, and time is of the essence. And if you leave it on too long, your photo's completely gone. If you don't leave it on long enough, you don't see much technique. So this process works best on images that have a lot of dark areas like these. So I'm going to do my examples on these darker papers. Areas with a lot of blue gives a real interesting effect as well. Any areas that have a lot of white in them are not going to be so exciting because the way that the colors are laid on the paper, as I mentioned before, there's a top layer blue, and then it goes down to red, and then beneath that red there's yellow, and then it's your paper. So an area like this has no place to go. It's just going to go straight to white. Whereas an area like in here, where you have those dark shadows, you're going to get some interesting color variations. So I'm going to move some of these out of the way. I'll start with this one here, since there's a lot of dark areas, just to give you an example of how bleach affects the surface. So have your water ready. And what I have here is 1 part water to 1 part bleach in a glass spray bottle. And so this is going to give me a couple of different options for applying. I could either spray it, or I can apply it with a paintbrush. So I'm going to paint onto this dry photograph, just like so. Now you see what's happening? It's turning red. So I'm going to rinse that off immediately. As soon as you start seeing the process happen is when you want to rinse, because if you sit there for even like 2 more seconds just to admire what's happening, it's gone. All of that is gone. And now this surface is also delicate, so you don't want to mess with it too much until it's totally dry. So it gives this neat, like flame-like appearance, and that's applying with a paintbrush. You want to use a natural bristle brush when you're applying your solution to the photo, because if it's a synthetic, it could wreck your bristles. So this is just like a boar's hair brush. And just to show you that again, I'll come into this area. Now this has already been wet, but you can see how it goes down to white if I just keep applying. So it goes from the red to the yellow to the white. And rinsing that off. So when you're first playing with this technique, start with a photo that can be your sacrificial technique photo, because it might not go the way you exactly think it's going to go, and you're going to have to work out the timing of it. The spray is fun because it gives you more of a organic feel. So I'm going to just spritz there and there. And now I'm waiting. You can see that it's starting to pull up. And I'm going to rinse it off. Just like so. Look at that. As I mentioned, it gives that flame-like quality. As it's wet, you can come in, do whatever type of sanding you'd like to add. And I'm going to rinse it one more time just to get the rest of that emulsion off. Dry it again, and then I'm going to set it over to dry. Okay, so since we have it in this little spray bottle here, another fun technique, let me just double check this guy is the right paper. The Crystal Archive, yes. You can play with the idea of stenciling. Doing a bleach stencil over. My friend Tracy Batista, who is an amazing artist, super innovative in all of her techniques, completely turned me on to stenciling with paints. So now I've kind of taken those ideas and now I'm playing with bleach. What do you know? So I'm putting a little stencil on top. This is an old doily. Spraying on. You don't want to go over the top with the bleach. You don't want to drench it, but you just want to moisten that surface. I'm going to pull back. Put that over there. Now I'm watching the surface. And I'm going to rinse because I can see that the emulsion's moving around. Rinse. Now it's not going to be a perfect stencil every time. It's kind of a surrender to the process to see what the process brings to you. But it is exciting because you don't know what you're always going to get. So sometimes it could be a lot of fun. Other times you might be like, oh, that's all right. But just keep playing around and you get the right balance. If you find that your solution is processing your images too quickly, add a little more water. That'll just slow it down. But I am happy with this neat design that's created on the dark areas. Now you could see the areas that have a lot of light in the photo. It's not quite as spectacular because, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of travel, so to speak, for the bleach through the paper. So it's the dark areas that you're really going to see that transformation. So I'm going to set that to dry. And let's do that again, since it was so much fun. just to show you how different photos will look differently with the same technique and even the same stencil. So I'll put that here. And again, this is the Fuji paper. Pull the stencil off, set it to dry. The processed photos on the kiosks, basically bleach does nothing to that surface. I don't know what it is, but it's not able to be penetrated by the bleach. And I'm rinsing off nice and gently. And again, you can see darker areas are more spectacular. Areas with a little light, not so much. But it does create an interesting composition. Kind of a spontaneous composition. You know, you have your photo and then you're adding these other elements to it, not really knowing what you're gonna get. So it's fun just to play and see what comes forward. So I'm gonna set that to dry. I'm not gonna sand the edges on this one because I have that nice dark frame around the outside. So I'm just gonna set that to dry. Other stenciling techniques. Oh, let me show you how nice the blue looks. Nice New Mexico sky here. Here's a piece of lace. I'm working dry photo, dry stencil. Set that nice and flat. I'm gonna spray. I'm not really gonna add too much down here. I'm actually going to move that up a little higher too. I'm going to focus just on a part of the photo and I'm going to spray. Okay. Pull off the stencil. Give it a minute just to kind of do its thing. And then I'm going to rinse. There we go. And so what I like about when there's a lot of blues in the photo, you get these interesting pinks. So I'm not even going to touch that. I'm going to set that to dry and try to keep what's in there. The idea of working with the bleach, if you want a more controlled medium, or a way to better control it rather, you can play around with the bleach pens that they make also. That's more in like a gel form, so it's not as watery, but I think it's fun to kind of have that spontaneity that you're not really knowing what you're gonna get. I'll do this one here again with the lace because I like that. And then this here is a stencil for Mendi henna, like when you get the henna on your hands. But there's so many stencils out there right now that you can find in the craft stores even, that you can play around with this technique. And even just looking around, like you see I'm using a doily, I'm using lace, you probably have things that you might not have thought of as stencils. So I'm spraying that on, pulling that off, moving my stencils. Now I'm going to rinse. And rinse. So again, the dark areas. I didn't do much over in here because I knew with all that white showing, it was not going to be anything all that spectacular. So I just left it as is. So that process alone is gonna keep you pretty busy. Going through all those old photographs that you have and spraying them with a little bleach and water. Let's take a look here. The technique is very, very fiery. So it does give you a flame-like effects. You can see here all the different ways in which I applied the bleach solution to those photos. Just for the heck of it, I will show you what happens when you add bleach to the other printed photos, the ones that are on the kiosk. So, all right, so this photograph here, if this was a photograph that was printed on the traditional photo processing machine, this area here would give us those real fiery colors. I'm just going to go straight on here. So as you can see, nothing's happening here. See that? It's completely unaffected. So unfortunately, if you want to play with this technique, you can't use the photo kiosk paper. You have to use the traditional. And you could even talk, like if you're not so sure of what your local photo processor is using, just you could ask some questions, ask what type of paper they're using, what type of technique. But I always find that the ones that you mail away for and come back to you are the ones that have the fun paper. And when I say fun, the ones that you can bleach and scratch into. All right, so I'm going to clean my surface and get ready for the next steps.